Design thinking slide deck. What is design thinking? The concept of design thinking is a way to develop a type of mindset that teaches an individual to empathize with their user and create a problem to satisfy the specific user's needs. It is a multi-step process that requires the individual to interview their user, determine the struggles that their user faces, develop solutions, and receive feedback. Empathy is key in the initial stage during the interview, and when defining a problem the user faces, take time to understand the struggles they face in their daily life. It is about recognizing that everyone has their own story. In this process, it is not about developing the best solution from the very beginning, but rather creating many solutions that are innovative, receiving feedback on each solution, and then deciding the best solution for your user. It is important to keep an open mindset and not to get fixed on a specific solution. To create the best solution, it is essential to listen to the user's feedback and build on it. Think about the practical application of the solution that you have created in order to identify whether it will satisfy the problem identified in the beginning stages. This process helps develop many traits that apply to all fields, such as being observant to the user's specific needs and struggles, empathetic to the user's situation, and resilient to the problems faced. For educators, it is a way to foster inclusion, promote innovation, and constantly develop new solutions. Design thinking is a process that can be used in many fields because it is a process that creates a solution that is meaningful and intentional. From the empathy stage of the design thinking process, I gained a lot of key insights from the video I watched with the speech and language pathologist working with a child with Down syndrome. I learned that children with Down syndrome are eager to learn interactively. They like working with teachers, their specialists, parents. They also have an easier time learning nouns than action words, such as bike, car, book. These words are easier for them to pronounce and easier for them to say. Children with Down syndrome also often get frustrated when they can't verbally express their feelings. Children with Down syndrome do most of their learning from other people, meaning the phrases and sentences, words they learn often come from the people around them, their parents, teachers, specialists. Children with Down syndrome also often learn to sign before they can speak verbally. This could be due to the fact that they have a harder time with simple motor functions in their mouth. This makes it harder for them to say certain words. So often, children with Down syndrome learn to sign language before they can speak verbally and start to associate the certain signs with certain words. Children with Down syndrome are also more likely to use crying and gesturing and looking to communicate what they can't say. This often serves some kind of function for them, getting the teacher or parents' attention when they can't verbally get it. Also, children with Down syndrome learn better in multisensory ways when they can learn visually, interactively. This will help them develop language faster. Thus, in order to gain better insight about my user, a child with Down syndrome, I watched an interview with speech and language pathologists who work with kids with Down syndrome. In the study portion of this, I was able to gain insight from the speech and language pathologist about typical development in children with Down syndrome. They identified that kids with Down syndrome still go through the same stages of physical development, just often at a slower rate. Oftentimes, children with Down syndrome know more than they can say, and as they get older, we need to give them the tools as educators to express how they feel to the people around them in a classroom setting or at home. In the do portion, from watching the video, I was able to learn that children with Down syndrome can sign at a very early age and generally before they can talk. They often learn to sound vowels and words as they are signing, and they're extremely good at visual learning. Children with Down syndrome also struggle to form original sentences and generally learn how to speak from the people around them. In the thinking portion, I was able to try and put myself in their shoes about how children with Down syndrome think. In this, I was able to see that children with Down syndrome can often understand a command given to them. However, they can't respond to it verbally. I also saw that children with Down syndrome generally are thinking a lot about how they feel, but can't express it in verbal words. This tells me that their cognitive abilities are strong, but fine motor skills generally lag behind. In the field portion, I tried to put myself in my user's shoes, and I was able to understand that my subject may often get frustrated if they can't express how they feel, and are very excited to learn the different activities presented in front of them. In this stage of the design thinking process, I've been able to define a problem for my user, children with Down syndrome, that I find imperative to their educational and social success. Being able to verbally communicate in the general classroom will help foster inclusion and foster inclusion in their community. When my user cannot communicate their needs and wants, they often will feel isolated from their community or in the classroom. Verbal communication development in children with Down syndrome is later developed due to their fine motor skills. Children with Down syndrome learn when they are able to dictate what they are interested in learning about. Narrowing the age range of my user is important because that is the time for critical language development. Children with Down syndrome learn immensely through social interactions and need to be able to develop language to continue their learning in social settings. And visual and interactive learning strategies are how my user learns best. I'm going to take all of these insights into account when I am in the ideation phase, creating solutions for my user. I will try to develop solutions that are visually and interactively appealing to my user, and try and create a solution that helps them dictate their own learning as well. In the ideation phase of the design thinking process, I came up with 5 possible solutions that I feel would satisfy my user's needs. The first possible solution I came up with was an augmentative and alternative communication app with language development games. It would include pictures and symbols and a voice output system to communicate the user's needs based on the icon they select. The second solution I came up with was an augmentative and alternative communication language board. This would help develop different words for the user and would be color-coded and include pictures and symbols. The third solution I came up with was an articulation bag. It would include various sounds, words, with coordinating pictures for my user to develop their use of language. The fourth solution I came up with was a voice output smartwatch. This would not have the typical features that a general smartwatch would have. It would be solely for the user to communicate their needs based on the icons they select. The fifth solution I came up with was a simple smartphone. This would also not have the same features as a typical smartphone. It would be limited to apps for language development that would be interactive, that the child could do on their own or in a classroom setting, and would also include a way for the user to voice words and commands in the classroom or at home. In this phase, it became apparent that creating technology that would help a student with Down syndrome develop or express language would be the most beneficial for them. The biggest struggle I faced when developing ideas was finding an assistive technology that would help communicate the child's needs and develop language in them, but not do all the work for them. It is important to have a device that uses pictures and symbols for the child to associate with vocabulary words and develop their verbal use of the word. I received feedback from a speech and language pathologist who declared that the development of sounds is one of the biggest obstacles for a child with Down syndrome because of their motor development. Therefore, I found that using an articulation bag would be the most beneficial in developing sounds and associating words with pictures and symbols. This would be an interactive experience and would keep the child engaged when they are able to physically look at the pictures and dictate their learning by choosing pictures and sounds from the bag themselves. In the prototype phase, I chose to do a prototype of an articulation bag. I found that making an articulation bag would be easy to develop and require minimal materials if a parent or teacher wanted to create one specific to their user. I found that the ability to make the items in the bag specific to the user's needs would be the best way to increase language development for that user, since every child is different and is learning language at different rates. The articulation bag is also universal to multiple settings and can be used in the general classroom with the student's peers, or it could be used at home. Students with Down syndrome learn a lot from their peers, and it would help foster inclusion as well. It was challenging to find a solution that would be engaging for the user, but also stimulate a curiosity in learning. It was important to develop a device that wouldn't overcompensate for the child's needs by completely speaking for them. That is why I chose the articulation bag, because I feel it would help develop language but not overcompensate. It is a hands-on solution and can be used with a parent, teacher, and can be and when used with a parent or teacher, it can force the user to practice the sounds associated with that picture or symbol. The design thinking process, I was able to receive feedback from my partner on what worked well, what could be improved, questions they may have, and ideas to improve my solution. For what worked well, my partner identified that the articulation bag was easy and engaging prototype for students with Down syndrome and helps to develop communication sounds. It is something that parents could also make at home. For things that could be improved, my partner identified that as their vocabulary increases, maybe to introduce harder vocabulary words or use an app or a speaker so the child can hear the sounds of the words as well. Some questions that my partner had would be, how could you color code it? Or how could you make it more difficult as the students increase their vocabulary? How can you foster inclusion in this activity? An idea they had was that with a language board, you could group them by nouns, pronouns, or verbs instead of corresponding sounds. Some key insights that I gained from the feedback from my partner during the testing phase were that my articulation bag was universal due to its multi-setting usage. It is also easy for parents or teachers to develop and make on their own and make specific to their own user. It is an interactive and hands-on engaging experience for my user, which is something I identified will help the child to learn faster and develop language quicker. It is also something that can be used with a teacher, parent, or in peer groups. It can be used in the general classroom as a group or class activity. It fosters inclusion in the general classroom for this exact reason, that it can be done with peers or with teachers in a group setting. I struggled with ways to increase the level of difficulty for the student and for my specific user. I thought it could be used in combination with a sentence board to develop grammar, syntax. Once a student has built a strong enough vocabulary, I think this is a way to help increase the level of difficulty. I also thought that the articulation bag could be made into an app form where it has different levels of language development, where they'll build from sounds to nouns, then verbs, and eventually into sentences where the user can learn grammar and syntax rules. Throughout this design thinking journey, I began to empathize with how my user feels when they can do or say everything that their classmates do in the classroom, or how frustrating it would be not to communicate their daily needs. The more time I spent going through the design thinking journey over the course of the semester, the more I began to think outside of the box when generating new ideas. I have realized that fostering inclusion is extremely important in children with disabilities. Design thinking is something that I have found can be integrated into daily teaching because educators should be always looking for new solutions to satisfy and help support their students' needs. I think I was successful in creating solutions that were very specific to my user and using the feedback I received to build on my solutions and try and improve them. I faced challenges trying to find ways to improve my prototype because I believe it is a solution that takes time and takes time to see results. If I were doing this over again, I would like to be able to apply it in the classroom setting and be able to see practical application and be able to work with a specific user over a course of a time. From this experience, I have learned that there is always ways to improve solutions and develop new solutions to satisfy the user's needs. Initially, developing an innovator's mindset was a struggle for me because it was hard for me to think of ideas that were unique and different. I wasn't able to come up with out-of-the-box ideas until I really put myself in my users' positions. Taking the time to think about how my user feels when they can't communicate was the initial step in creating positive solutions. I also did research on strategies that speech and language pathologists have used in order to develop a basis of good practices that help develop language in children. Generating many solutions was an essential part of being an innovator, and receiving feedback on my solutions helped me grow as an innovator to help me think as an educator to build off my previous solutions.